Hi everybody, it's Kat B here. Welcome to the Inspired Connections podcast show. I'm coming to you live from the UK this week. Andy's travelling, so it's just me. It's Girls Week. And I've got the lovely Lai Rah Mayo with me. Lai Rah, welcome. Tell everybody about yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. My name's Lai Rah Mayo. I'm over in Leeds in the UK. Essentially, my journey started back in March 2019 when my 20-year-old Oliver sadly slipped away in his sleep, which basically, as I said, started my journey. So Ollie was at uni at the time, in a house share with three other boys, and he didn't wake up.
That must be so challenging, Lyra, especially when you didn't get any diagnosis and you really did try every which way to find out what had happened, and the results came back inconclusive. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So it took 4 months for them to make a diagnosis, because he was relatively healthy, as any other 20-year-old boy at uni can be with the drinks and partying. But generally he had no real issue. He had asthma when he was little, but from my point of view, it was well managed. He took his inhaler twice a day, and he was fine. But obviously, initially, I think as anybody dealing with grief, you go into autopilot. So I did for a couple of months, after the funeral, trying to sort out everything, and eventually you sit down, and when you have, I wouldn't even say a spare moment, but it does creep up on you. So I wanted some answers.
I bet you were just in complete shock, weren't you?
Absolutely, yes. We had a great relationship. I was talking to him, just 2 days before that. We either text or talk on the phone quite a bit. So yes, it was a massive shock. As I said, the night when we found out that he had transitioned, to try and find out where his friends were, because obviously they were quite upset and everybody had gone home. As I say, they were at uni in a house share. So yeah, it's just trying to piece together what happened, but that's the physical side of us, isn't it? Trying to work out what happened the minutes leading up to it. You ask the questions: was he actually poorly? Did he show any signs of a headache? Why didn't he wake up? Obviously, as I say, after the funeral, when we sit down and start thinking, it's like, he can't just be gone. He's got to be somewhere, and that led to, I'd say 5 years of, it's not really stopped, but 5 years of quite intensive searching, really.
And you're quite scientific in mind. You're a lawyer by trade. So is it fair to say left brain thinking, and you want the analytical steps, and you want to know, you're very methodical is the feeling that I get, Lyra. And so was this quite a confusing journey for you, or just the mother and the maternal instinct just kicked in?
Yeah, so as I say, I basically didn't know where to go, and I consulted a medium, and that led me to UCAT. Lots of YouTube and various other sites, particularly like Grieving Parents. And as I say, that kind of led me to you, and I'm grateful. Intensive 6 weeks mediumship course. But I also remember at the time, I think the very first one-to-one that I had with you, Kat, was on a Wednesday. But on the Monday, like 2 days before, was when I found out the cause of death. That, because up to that point, I thought it was sudden death. There was nothing that we could have done, and it's just just that. And it turned out that, as I say, 2 days before I had my course with you, the coroner phoned me and said he had a virus which is called human metapneumovirus. So it's a flu to me and you. But for some reason, for Ollie, it stopped his immune system and triggered a symptomless asthma attack. So back into 2019, bearing in mind it was the year before COVID, I was quite angry. It's like, how, in 2019, with all the medical technology we have in the world, how can a virus take an ordinarily healthy lad? So I remember my first lesson with you, and it's trying to like raise our vibration, and I just felt quite blocked, and that's the grief kicking in. So it was a bit of a soul searching and trying to find ways to not unblock the grief, but certainly divert the grief so that we can reach the state where we can lift our vibration.
Tell me how connection Because just somebody listening who's never had an experience with the spiritual world and who thinks, okay, Lyra's just met a medium and the medium's put her in on a course, and the skeptic's going to say, this feels very convenient. Do you understand? And so how did it help you, Lyra? And would you have, looking back, would you have changed anything?
I think it's helped me tremendously. I honestly wouldn't know where I would be. I'd still be here because I'm a firm believer that, I'm going to be here till I'm 80. um, you know, um, but yeah, I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. And I think that, like any, I'd say, young people, in our teens, we're always curious about dreams. We're curious about the spiritual world. And then, the exams and boys and schooling and career takes over, and you forget all about those. So then, obviously, after Ollie passed, and I just wanted answers. So as I say, I went to see a local medium, and that was because at the time I wasn't aware that the spirit world is so, they're just here, aren't they? Right, and I always remember that I've been offered to have a reading online. I'm thinking, no, I don't want him over where you are, Kat. I want him here next to me, giving me messages, telling me, whispering in my ear. So I went to a local medium, and she's only half an hour away, but it was just such a profound experience, because afterwards, when I came out, I'm just thinking, actually, if she can speak and hear him, there were things that within that reading that she couldn't have known. I don't have a massive, I do now, but at the time I didn't have a massive social media presence. I have quite an unusual name. I don't really post anything. So, she knew stuff about my gran, who had passed like 20 years ago. So, and about her childhood and, stuff like that. So anyway, at the end of that, I basically felt that if she could do it, I could do it. And so I as I say, I then went on the course with yourself and, was on your circle for a while. But then I thought, well, with mediumship, we kind of invite them into our space and we blend with their energy, and, and it's all about believing. But then I'm suddenly thinking, hang on a minute, I'm the mother here. Yeah. Why am I inviting him into my space? Why can't I go in, go and knock on his door? I want to be, I'm still his mom. So I started looking into out of body, out of consciousness, and it's all the same. It's just a matter of perspective.
Let's just break it down for the people listening, Lyra. So what you did is develop your own mediumship. You learned to not have a crutch and lean on somebody else. You learned to develop the intuitive skills within you in order to hear Ollie yourself. And when you got to a certain level and you could get the vibration, you could sense him, you could feel him, you were getting communication, you then took it a stage further and you started to explore the dream world and out of body. And you got, I think naturally, because you are very left brain, you got very scientific. You wanted the binaural beats, which for anybody listening is a method of sound frequency that interrupts and confuses the brain. It's about one frequency going into the right side and one going into the left, and it causes the brain waves to change and allows this opening to experience otherworldly things. Is that fair to say? Tell me your story. What happens next?
So yeah, I tried a number of things. So for a while, and it's all about persistence, isn't it? And it's the same with I think mediumship. And what I learned as well, so I went on like various different courses. There's the Monroe Institute, which I just think that at the end of the day, I wanted to connect with my son. It doesn't matter how I get there. Yeah, it doesn't matter what tools I use, as long as I get there. And I found that there was a lot of similarities between meditation and out of body experience, because you can have active out of body experience like daydreaming, and that's very similar to meditation, where you clear your mind, you go down a path, and you go to a deliberate place in order to meet, in my case, Ollie. And with daydreaming, you do the same thing. With out of body, you do the same thing, and it's just a matter of like working out what's best. And I then expanded it a little bit further. I mean, we all talk about our spirit guide and our guardian angels, and the team in the spirit world that helps us to be, if we were to do a reading, for example, and that's the best way to learn and to hone in on skills, is basically to do readings for other people. So at first, I was doing what everybody else told me to do, which is like, ask your guide to give you that information, ask your guide to take you to this place, ask your guide to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm thinking, well, actually, in all these readings, I'm like literally holding my hand and going, please, Ollie, come through. I want to hear from you. And then I had one reading where I suddenly thought, and I think it was him telling me, it's like, Mum, stop asking me the same questions, And the questions were, are you okay? Are you happy? What are you doing? And, are you safe? Which is, the same questions that all parents would ask their children. But to be fair, if he was hearing the physical, and every time I pick up the phone, it's like, have you eaten? Are you cold? Are you warm? Have you had enough sleep? He'd go crazy on me. So anyway, at that particular session, I thought, well, actually, what I can do is I can ask you to be my guide. I can ask you to bring forth the spirit who I'm reading, who I'm trying to connect with. And so he's basically been my guide for the last 3 years, I would say.
Yeah. And the reason that you were reading for people is you wanted to get rid of self-doubt and validation, and having somebody to witness your mediumship and give you evidence that what you're bringing through is correct and not just your imagination, then helps you realise what you're getting for yourself is correct. So there's a process there and a logic that you were trying to follow to make sure that your connection for yourself, your personal mediumship, was accurate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Then you get the headphones. You start to work with the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute is Robert Monroe's legacy in a way, and there is a USA and a UK side to it. Robert Monroe, for those listeners that don't know, really started to have spontaneous out-of-body experiences. He was an executive, was it ABC television or production in the USA? He worked for a TV station, is that right?
Yes, that's right, yes.
And he started having spontaneous experiences, and at first didn't tell anybody. He just thought they were really strange. And then he started to document them, and he documented them so accurately that he was then able to describe and share in later life, and eventually create his own institute and start doing experiments and learning about brainwaves. And he passed this big legacy on to people about techniques for getting out of body and experiencing. A lot of people are kind of nervous or frightened about out of body experiences because, and I know I was at the beginning stages too, will the body still, will the heartbeat and the breathing still exist if I go out of body? Will something happen to my physical body? Will I be able to get back in? Those kind of things. And what you actually find is it's harder to stay out and get out than it is to fail to get back in. The minute that you lose focus, you're straight back in. And I had an experience, I don't know what your experience has been, but I remember my guide saying, just drop backwards, cat. And they took me out of body, but just the top half of me, just enough so that I could witness that the physical body was still breathing and operating without my consciousness. And that really kind of shocked me in some way to understand. I know people say that the breath is automatic and everything, but to realise that my consciousness was stood back and my body was still breathing was quite something for me to take in. And it gave me a lot of hope and sort of took away some of the fear, if you will. But you really went, unlike me who just kept dipping the toe in, you really went full. I think you kind of exceeded me and went full full speed ahead. And you started really concentrating on a very regular basis, like the techniques to get out of body. Tell me about your first experience, Lyra. How long did it take you to have a spontaneous out of body experience? And tell me, did you get to see Ollie? Did you get the experience that you were looking for?
Yeah, so yeah, I probably started looking into it and practicing it. This is actually before the Monroe Institute. I knew about it. A friend had, told me about it, and I've got stacks of books but never got around to reading it. So I knew a little bit about it. And I was just, so there's a lady called Jade Shaw who was my first astral travel teacher, so to speak. I did a course with her over like 6 weeks or something like that. And it was a great experience. So she told us like the basic techniques, like, how you can get out of body, what to expect. But, actually experiencing it is you can't be prepared for it. I just remember, so during this course, I always listened to the same YouTube track that I just happened to find. And I quite enjoyed it. So I listened to it, and it's about an hour long, this track. And so I listened to this track, and I remember I was in this room at the time, and I just felt like, how can the only way I can describe it is as if I was stuck in the middle of the duvet, like between the duvet and the sheets, yeah? Like when you're kids, you kind of, it's cozy and you kind of slip in and sometimes you can't find your way out. But I felt like I was stuck in this duvet, like being cocooned by it, and somebody or two people or a team of people getting hold of this duvet with me in the middle and just shaking me quite violently. Now, I didn't realize at the time that this is the vibrational state. This is when your energy body starts detaching from your physical body. So, and actually, this is also the sleep paralysis state. Yeah, which is why I was laid there thinking, come on, this is getting a bit boring now. But I didn't realize I was in sleep paralysis. I was wide awake. I just felt that somebody was shaking violently. And anyway, the next time I spoke to Jade and I explained it, and she went, "Hey, you're in the vibrational state." And I went, damn, that's the bit that, you launch yourself out. And luckily for me, the next day it happened again. And because I knew what to expect now, I just went, out of body now, out of body now. And all of a sudden, I felt that I was in the corner of the room looking down at myself. And I've been told that, you need to leave your body, like get away from your physical body as quickly as possible, because once you start panicking and say, oh, what am I doing down there? You're going to be sucked straight back in. So I said, oh, take me to my front room, because I was in this room and I was expecting it to take me to my living room, but I was actually in my front bedroom. I'm thinking, that's not what I was expecting. And then I went, take me to the park. And I was sat on top of these trees and I'm thinking, I've been to this park, just not at this angle before. So, each time I'm thinking, yeah, is it me or is it not? So then I went, take me to so-and-so's house. And I was like stood at the bottom of their bed. Right. This was about 4 o'clock in the morning. So I felt like, a bit of a peeping Tom. And I went, no, take me to the piano room. And so, I was going for all these. And at the time, I saw this piano. They have a piano room with the grand piano. And I thought, I wonder if I can play. They say that when you're in that sleep paralysis state, the out of consciousness state, this is when you can learn different things. There's a lot of famous, is it Mozart? That's supposed to have been in, like created his music during the sleep paralysis vibrational state. So I thought, oh, I wonder if I can play piano, and ding ding. And I saw one of the dogs, like actually saw one of the dogs like jump up out of the bed with his ears like stuck open, like high up. Yeah, this is the dog at my friend's house. And then I remember like this tune, and it was so nice. Yeah, and it's like, oh, I can play the piano. And then, shortly after that, I woke up, and then a couple of hours later, I phoned her and I went, oh my gosh, I think I was at your house, a few hours ago. And she's like, was it 4 o'clock in the morning? And I was like, yeah, how do you know? Like, because the dog woke up, like completely freaked out, threw up all over the bed as if he heard something, right? So then they had to let the dog out of the house, and went past the kitchen. And before they got to the kitchen, it was the piano room, and the dog froze, right? Because obviously he could see me. So it was kind of like verified. And the annoying thing about it all was that, yeah, it was such a intense, I can still feel everything now, as if it just happened. But the annoying thing is, it's like, why didn't I go and see Ollie? I was just so absorbed in making sure I was outside of my body and away from my body, I forgot to go and see him. So then since then, I've been like desperately like trying to replicate that. But then I found that actually I don't have to physically be in that state again in order to go out of body. I can do it via dreams. So, and again, I was really lucky. And I think the spirit world, the universe, they just help you in any way that they can, because they know that we want to connect with them. So the first night I had the vibrational state. The second night I had the full on classic out of body experience. The third night I had the classic lucid dreaming, where you look down at your hand and you can do all sorts of things, which for me was a good it was a fantastic opportunity to be able to compare the two and know which state I'm in. So yeah, that's kind of, I still I still use lucid dreaming quite a lot. I mean, a lot of people think lucid dreaming has to be like where you go, you suddenly wake up in your sleep and you kind of say, right, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and basically change your sleep. Now, I managed to do that when I first had the lucid dreaming, but I don't think you necessarily need to do that, because I don't think you need to be actually asleep in order to have the lucid dreaming, which is like bordering on meditation. So I do it sometimes, like in the middle of the night, I might, if I have, so like you say, I'm a lawyer, and I had a case where it just wouldn't go away. And it just kept coming back. I deal with quite a niche area in local cost law, so it's all about money. It's all about paying, the solicitor's fees, and this case just kept coming back, and just kept coming back, and I dealt with it, and I thought, right, okay, that's the end of it. And then 6 months later, it'll come back, and and then it's like, why is it coming back? This guy is still haunting me, right? He just wouldn't go away. And then a friend of mine said, maybe you could ask, yeah, if it's like a recurring nightmare, isn't it? Until it's been dealt with, they're always going to do it. So I basically, one night I woke up in the middle of the night, normally about 2 or 3 o'clock, and right, okay, I'm ready now, Ollie. Meeting me at the bench. So we go to this bench, and I basically shut my eyes, walk down this path, and he meets me at the bench, and I went, come on, then show me what I've done wrong. Yeah, what is it I need to know? And then
you thought this repetitive thing was coming up because there was something in your soul hadn't resolved
yeah,
what it was learning and wanting to experience. Is that right?
yes. So sometimes, like in that particular case, Ollie led me back to my office, and it showed me a particular scene when I went absolutely berserker for something. And it's like, oh, maybe that I shouldn't have handled it like that. So then the next day when I went back to work, I got this case out. It's like, right, okay, let's revisit it. Let's do it a different way. Let's approach my opponent in a slightly different angle. And we managed, and not to take it so personally, because, at the end of the day, it's work, isn't it? But I took it quite personal because it felt like a direct attack at me, which is what Ollie was trying to say to me. It's like, not everything is about you, be detached from it. So yeah. So what started off as a means to try and, check up on Ollie, I suppose, and make sure he's okay, have led to a lot of exploration on my part.
With your everyday life.
Yes, and because I'm very open about, spiritualism, what I do, and and a lot of colleagues and people that I know, call me up and say, look, I've been having this recurring nightmare, or I've been, I've got this problem. How do you think I should deal with it? And I went, well, spiritually, I think you should, do this, this, and this. Or, in the case of a recurring nightmare, I said, right, okay, what you need to do is learn how to get out of sleep paralysis. Because once you know you can get out of sleep paralysis, you can, when you get scared, you can then snap out of it and wake up. You don't have to be in that situation. But, if you know that you don't have to be in that situation, you can test it. So I had this friend who came to me and said, that she's been having this recurring nightmare. And I said, explain it. And she's like, she says, I'm in this room, and I'm holding onto my throat like I'm being strangled, but I'm not being strangled. And I went, well, I says, are you awake? Do you know you're awake? And she says, yeah. She says, I try and scream, I try and run, but I'm just like rooted on the spot. And I went, well, on a human level, I think there's something that you want to say to somebody or some people, but you can't. I said, so, but on a spiritual level, that's, it's your subconscious asking you to deal with it. So she says, well, what do I do? And I went, well, the way you snap out of sleep paralysis is when we're in sleep paralysis, the eye, the REM, is required. And also we obviously need to breathe.
Just for people listening, because we're getting very technical. REM, repetitive eye movement. So it's a state, it's one of the cycles of sleep, and it's the cycle of sleep that you get lucid in. And by lucid, we mean awake in your dream state. So your brain, the frontal cortex of the brain is awake and enlightened. So it feels more real than your everyday life. It doesn't feel like a normal dream. It feels like you are absolutely in it. You feel very alive. Sometimes more alive. You can feel the hairs go up in your arm. You can feel temperature changes. It feels very, very real, doesn't it? And so you've got this recurrent state. What did you ask her to do?
So she knew she was in sleep paralysis. So as I say, to get out of sleep paralysis, obviously your eyes, the repetitive eye movement is happening, so you can't really do anything about it. But the other thing that that still functions is your throat, because you need to breathe. I said to my friend, I says, right, okay, whistle, right, because you're focusing on the whistling. And she says, well, what if I can't whistle? I went, hiss, just do something, right? But actually, it's the same with, some people think some like a really heartwarming, something that really touches your heart, yeah. And it's all about shifting the focus away from the sleep paralysis to a different area. So in my case, I think that it's easier to learn to hiss. So and she says, well, then what do I do? And I went, let me know once you've done that. So about a week later, she came back to me. She says, oh, I managed to, I woke up, I remembered. And I says, what did you do? And she went, well, I was stuck in this room and I was holding onto my throat and I got really scared. And I went, then what? Then I remembered you told me to hiss. And she went, yeah. And she says, so I hissed. And then what? And then I was next to my bed. I woke up in my bed. I was like elated, right? And right, okay. So now you know that you can wake up. And you also know that previously you shouted and screamed and your husband didn't hear you. So you know that, whatever you do in your dream, when you're in the sleep paralysis, nobody can hear. And she says, right. I says, so go and practice your speech. Change it into a big conference room or an auditorium or whatever, right? And just say what you want to say. And she went, how do I know? And I went, because you do. And she says, I says, there is something, stuck in your throat. Yeah. There is something that you want to say. So use that as your platform.
So what you're talking about here is, in the lucid state, we can make instructions and we can change the dreamscape or the dream area. So the dream character in this experience that she's having that's frightening her, what you're telling her to do is take control of it. To imagine that you're in this auditorium, not the room that she feels blocked and isolated in, where she has the power and the ability to tell the audience what it is that she can say that she's not been able to say in life. Is that right? And therefore clear the blockage that's frightening her. So it's almost role reversal. It's a little bit like when people are doing sports rehearsals for scoring a goal. You're allowing her to do this rehearsal, give herself this confidence in her dream state. Is that right?
Yes. And then she says, well, how do I know? What if I don't like it? And I says, wake yourself up, right? Hiss. And she said, well,
that's
how do I?
Really good, because that shows her as well that she doesn't have to stay in the fear, that if she hisses and comes out, she's also in control of it. She doesn't have to repetitively revisit it time and time again if she doesn't want to. I like that. Did she manage to get to the auditorium? Did she manage to say in her dream what she wanted to say?
I think she did. She's not mentioned about it for a long time now. I am also a volunteer for a charity, a bereavement charity in the UK called Sue Ryder. And essentially we get together once a week or whenever we can, but generally it's once a week, and we go to this hotel and anybody who's suffering from grief comes and, have a chat. So yeah, I do that, and quite often it always goes back to spiritualism and, and it's absolutely fascinating how many people actually believe in it or kind of touch on it but don't know what to say. So yeah, so as I say, what started off as looking out for Ollie had led me onto this path, and I believe that I helped quite a few people, and in turn actually that's helped me as well.
Yeah, so it's this lovely sort of something of meaning has come out of this awful situation, and you found that through your experience and your exploration, you've been able to meet other people and help them on their journey and take them out of the stuck place that some of us get stuck in or experience when we have a bereavement of any kind. But when it's a child, it's even harder, isn't it? I love that. What I love about you, Lyra, is that you've been open to many, many things. And I know that sometimes you teach with me in lucid dreaming, and what I love as well is that you've taken it to different angles with me. You'll experiment with the teas and the different, legal substances, we should say, that can enhance, is it Blue Lotus? Is it the tea that you take? Is it Blue Lotus?
Yes, Blue Lotus is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lyra's more experimental than me. She'll try some of these teas and things that I won't try. But you've experienced these things, and you've allowed, your understanding has just grown. You've been very, very open. You've worked with many different people. You've helped teach many people alongside myself. We've seen quite transformation of people really having amazing experiences in lucid dreaming and being able to make connection with their loved ones and get true evidential messages that have proven to be transformative and really help them heal. And the other thing about these kind of states, for people that aren't aware of it, is that you can explore your shadow self, the areas of you, as you've described for your friend there, that are repetitive nightmares. They're just consciousness, your own consciousness, telling you something is unresolved, that you've repressed something and you're able to release it. And so people that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder or issues of an emotional sense, these techniques, which may seem not controversial but seem quite out there for some people, can turn out to be sort of sliding door moments, if you will, that unlock a door or unlock something in a very natural way without the use of medication, and something that is accessible and easy for all of us to achieve and experience, and take them to a beautiful space of healing. And your journey through losing Ollie, although it's been very painful, you've also experienced a lot of joy and a lot of healing, and a lot of new things have come into your life, but you're still, at the end of the day, a very balanced lawyer. You're still able to do your corporate work, but you have this unique side to you that your left brain and right brain thinking now. You've rebalanced some of that energy, and you're very open. I think that's a really beautiful thing, Lyra. For people watching or listening, any top tips or things that you'd say to them that really kind of did transform your pain, or kind of, I know you talked about reaching out to others and doing courses that help distract your mind. It wasn't just about the actual connection. I think actually having like-minded people that were going through the same thing around you, good conversation, things that could take your mind away from the deep grief or distract it for a while is not a bad thing as well. Share with other people. What would you say to them? What would you tell them?
I think that what I learned as well, I think the big thing for me was that at the time that Ollie passed, I have Oscar, who's now 21. So Oscar was only 15 at the time, and also Elsie, who was only 18 months at the time. So obviously, like, quite young. I was very worried about Oscar and making sure that he was okay. So as a parent, you just go on autopilot, which I did for possibly like 5 years. I thought I was okay. I was doing all my spiritual stuff. I was making great connection. But then when Oscar reached 20, the age that Ollie passed away, I plummeted a little bit. And, and I think for the first time in 5 years, I just went, actually, I'm not okay. And acknowledging that, because eventually, if I hadn't done, I think that it would have got much worse. It would have taken me longer to climb out of this dip. So I think self-care is very, very important.
What did you do for self-care? Describe your self-care routine, Lyra.
Just making sure that you have your needs and you have your grief, and it's not the same as, so my grief isn't the same as Josh's grief. It's not the same as so Josh being my husband, and it's not the same as Oscar's, because I'm Ollie's mother, not his brother, not his stepdad. And so it's acknowledging that we have needs, and and we can grieve as the mother, or our relationship. So that sort of self-care, and not necessarily just making sure that everybody else around you, obviously they need to be all right, but you can't, we can't control whether they're all right or not. But we can control whether we are okay or not. If you know what I mean.
You're stronger, you can then help support them through their experiences, but you can't necessarily carry that grief or take that grief on for them. You can only walk alongside them, and realizing that actually your grief is unique to you and Ollie's is unique to him, but at the same time you can share experiences, but you can't judge or change his experience, and he's got to be allowed to walk through that, no matter how much you want to protect him and you want to take that away from him.
Yeah. And I think really good point. I think also that, for example, when I do the volunteering work, a lot of them are through hospice, so they're like much elderly people, or more sudden or whatever. But it obviously followed a period of illness or in the hospice before they finally transitioned. So I speak to them quite a bit, and whilst I explain, how I dealt with, certain anniversaries or certain people or whatever, I also say to them, it's you need to, be sure that you're dealing with it how you're addressing your grief, not what other people tell you to do, how to behave. And and as I say, they're mostly elderly, and one of the questions that keeps popping up is whether they're gonna like sell the house and downsize. And it's like, and then like a lot of them say, why do I need to downsize? Why do I need to leave this house that I've been living here with my wife or husband for the last 50 years just because she's they've gone, and it's as I say, it's trying to find the balance, and making sure that that the individual who's grieving, yeah, that whilst you've got the wider family, that at the end of the day you're the one that's responsible for your own needs.
Yeah. That's a really good point, isn't it? Sometimes people say don't make a life-changing decision in the first year of grief because you're not in the right place. Some people make very snap decisions and regret it. It is, some people will need to move house and some people won't, but it's good to give a period of time just to give yourself the chance to see how you feel, because you might be surprised that you manage it really, really well. I think that's a really good piece of advice. So listening to yourself, not rushing into things, not because you've got the adrenaline and the panic and the kind of sort of trauma and stress that's kicking in. And in those states, we can be quite reactive instead of sitting calmly and relaxing and taking our time with things. I think that's a really key thing that you brought up there, Lyra. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Can I just also add that also brings us back all the way around to spiritualism? As you say, I've dabbled in everything that I can in the last few years, and from ranging from mediumship to dreaming to out of body experience. I love the tarot cards. I just think that keep an open mind, and yes, it's a great distraction, but actually I think by being open to the spirit world and believing in the messages that we're getting, it's helped me profoundly through the years. So I think that
I think to understand that love is eternal and that your loved one doesn't die, and that consciousness lives on in a different form, speaks a slightly different language, and we can learn to speak that language and do that dance. And we can have a connection for ourselves, or we can go through somebody else for that connection. We can also recognize the signs and synchronicities that are around us and experience life from an elevated level and a different way of perceiving the world, and feel that connection is continuing, it's not ended, which I think is one of the most painful things in traditional grief, this idea that everything stops. I lost my father-in-law 3 years ago or so. I can honestly say I feel him with me, particularly when it's to do with things to do with my daughter. And I find it very useful, the advice and the support that I get from spirit in those moments. So I think it's very comforting to feel a sense of continuation, that I know that I've lost the physical side of my father-in-law who I adored, but at the same time, in terms of communication, I've still got his advice, his teaching, his support, his thoughts on certain things. And what's really nice now is I've got those thoughts from an elevated perspective, because he can see more than I can, and so he can give me better advice than before, because he was always good at advice, but now he's even better because he can see things from a different perspective, and that's kind of nice. Yeah, it gives me sort of added sort of smile to my face, if you will, because I feel that it's a very special bond, and you must feel the same way about Ollie, Lyra.
Yeah, I think so. I've had experience when I'm doing something or about to do something, and this memory pops up from when he was younger, and it might feel like completely unrelated, but somehow it's linked to it, and it's like, oh, actually, maybe I shouldn't do that, or or sometimes you think about something and you think, oh, shall I go, I don't know, somewhere or not? And you suddenly, out of nowhere, just remember a particular scene and the joy of that event. And you kind of, to me, it's like him saying to me, yeah, you need to go. Right? And it's for me, it's not dismissing, all these little hints, because they're always here. Yeah. And, I think at first, I always remember, Kat, I must have messaged you after one of those readings, like the earlier readings that you did for me and Ollie's dad together. And I felt that throughout the reading. I remember you saying, "You've seen a double rainbow today." I'm going, no, not seen a double rainbow. And then Ollie's dad would go, "Actually, I did see a double rainbow." And it's like, okay, that's you. You can take it. And then you said, "There's a photo on your desk, isn't it? It's in a frame, and you got it out or in a cabinet, but you were talking to this picture." I'm thinking, no, I didn't do that. And then Pete would go, "Yeah, that's me." And I think at the end of it, I message you and go, "Kat, this is so unfair, right? I paid, right, for this reading. Why am I only getting like little bits of stuff? Yeah, he should be here, right, with me. Not over his dad. I didn't know at the time that he could be here and everywhere."
Yeah.
And I remember you saying to me,
He knew they had regular contact with you, but he wasn't going to see his father very frequently. So in the reading, he wanted to prioritise him because he knew he was going to get less of an opportunity, whereas you were sitting every week, so he had full access to you all of the time.
yeah. I know now, but at the time it was like, that's not fair. But I think one of the term that Ollie told you about is, he needed to Ollify things, because I don't take it. We had a friend who said,
things, explain to them what that means, because somebody listening is going to be, what are they talking about? So in terms of signs and synchronicities, a lot of people will get hearts or generic things like feathers. And for some people, those are very, very special. But you being the lawyer and a left brain thinker, you were like, that's not good enough for me. I need something so specific to Ollie, and we called it Ollifying things. Is that right?
Yes, because he tends to appear with his name. Now, I tend to spell it Oly rather than Oli or Olii. And I think it was shortly after that, after saying that, he's going to Ollify things. It's like, okay, right. So, and on this particular day, I was just about to go to Berlin with Oscar. This is within a few months of Ollie passing. So I went down to the petrol station to get some, antihistamines or some tablets or whatever. And I was coming back, and there was a number plate that says Ollie. I was like, oh, okay, maybe you are showing sign, thank you. Then me and Oscar gets on the plane, we get over to Berlin, and we got lost, right? So I zoomed into my phone and start looking at the map, and the next town on is called Oliver's Place, and it's in a big roundabout, and it says Oliver's Place, and it's like, oh, okay, you are making an appearance, aren't you? Right? So for me, it was like, oh, this is incredible. And then the next minute, we get to the hotel, and all around it were billboards of an optician called Oliver's People, right? And it's like, wow, and it's, I think we find that the more we believe in it, the more we see them. Yeah, because if they're like constantly throwing feathers at me and I'm just acknowledging them, right, even if they throw a bucket of feathers at me, I'm still going to say, no, that's not you. But the moment that you acknowledge and you believe and say, yeah, okay, thank you, keep coming, it will just keep coming and keep coming.
Yeah, do you know, that's really interesting. I really think the spirit will do this on purpose. So I had a reading today, and the lady was very new to her grief, and her son actually was talking about how he was using his name as a sign for her and describing all the places it had shown up. One of the things that really struck me about that reading today was, I said to her, this is going to sound really strange, but he's talking about, you went into a shop and you got, it was almost like either a smoothie or it was a watered, it was like one of these flavoured waters, like a lemon and lime water. And you went in and it was, he's saying specifically it was yesterday, you went in and you bought this drink because it was something that he always drank. And a moment before you purchased it, you just got this feeling, I've got to drink that drink. I've got to go to a shop and I've got that. And you think that's your intuition, but it's not. It's your son saying, I just want to remind you that I'm here. I want you to experience something that I had joy from. And I loved lemon and lime water. And sure enough, it did transpire. She had that thought. She was then compelled to go into a shop. A minute later, she'd purchased the water and drank it. And then I said to her, and I know that at the end of it, you felt really, really tearful, and you did actually start to cry. and you couldn't really hold back the tears, but it gave you a release. And it was the joy mixed with the tears, sat side by side. But you understand that he did inspire that moment. And it was just like one of those incredibly simple things that you realise that it's those little associations, Lara, that the spirit world are inspiring, that are happening in our physical life. We just feel impelled or influenced to do something. And yet it's such a connecting moment. Very
Yeah,
beautiful. And I just think maybe that came up today because of exactly what you're saying. That's what the spirit world wanted to say in this podcast. They wanted to talk about those moments where they inspire something that reminds them of the joy they experienced in life, so that you get a little bit of that nostalgia and a little bit of that connection, but you also remember the things that they loved.
absolutely.
That's a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for coming in, Lyra. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Great to see you today, and thank you for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.